Welcome to the Woo, the Science, and You. I am Dr. Sophie.
And I am Jess Cunningham, founder of Belief Coding.
You can just call me Sophie, actually. You don't need to call me Dr.
No, I quite like
Sophie.
Dr. Sophie. It feels like Dr. Sophie.
Yes, so welcome to our first ever podcast. And we're doing this because, well, we are friends, met with our kids, our kids are mates.
And do you know what's really interesting? So we both have really different backgrounds, and yet on the school run, and when we've had like Vino, we've had such interesting debates, and nobody, like there seems to be a real bridge between science and spirituality, and it's either you're this or you're that, whereas actually like you can be both.
Yeah. So we come from quite different kind of backgrounds from our point of view and thinking. So I am a medical doctor, I'm a GP, although I am I've got a diploma in lifestyle medicine. So I'm already a bit more kind of interested in beyond just kind of pharmaceuticals, which doctors are anyway. Yeah. And then obviously...
You do realise that I think you're going to come totally over to the woo, Soph. Just don't want to know about spirituality, honestly. I think you're going to be like,
she's hooked me in. She's rocking me back.
So in 6 months' time, the podcast is the Woo and You.
Yeah, just scrap science. No, but we thought it'd be interesting, didn't we, to kind of talk about subjects that are considered kind of more alternative spiritual.
Yeah.
And then I come from this kind of generally pretty skeptical side. Yeah. See if you can convince me, and I will see if there's any science to kind of back up what's going on, or if we even need the backup or evidence. But anyway, so yeah. Do you want to talk about your background a bit more?
So it's funny actually, because I think, so my background, I've definitely gone into, so my background, so I've created a technique called belief coding, which essentially it rewires your subconscious programming. But I don't have a diploma. I'm not a therapist, nor do I claim to be. But the way belief coding was born was from my own experiences from like childhood and different things that I'd gone through and experienced up until recent years. And then I started to just train in absolutely everything to do with self-development, to do with just figuring out how people work. And it's always been a passion of mine. So from a spiritual aspect, I genuinely believe that everything that I've experienced from early childhood leading up to now, every book that I've read, every training course I've been on to, led me to create belief coding. And also I've had some crazy experiences, like both spiritual, but also kind of things that I can't really explain. This is why we have you, Sophie. So I think for me, my background is just like transformation at a subconscious level with our unconscious beliefs. And I'm totally open to anything that is just a bit woo and a bit out there and things that you can't quite explain, or should I say I can't quite explain, why it works, but it does work. And, some stuff, I mean, I'm sure we'll cover this. Like, I've been back to past lives and your face didn't lie there, so
I'm good. I'm over it. I think it's actually quite interesting if we say that, like, we were kind of almost put together as like a blind date by our children, weren't we?
Oh my God, yeah.
Totally. So both our eldest daughters, because we've got 8 kids between us.
Yeah.
Our friends, and like Betsy said to me, "You're gonna love Poppy's mum. You're gonna love Poppy's mum. She's just like you." Which we are, I think, yeah. And then I think maybe they said the same to you. And then we'd seen each other dropping off the kids and stuff. And then essentially one day we hadn't even properly talked that much. You just went, "Do you want to come firewalking on Saturday?" And I remember I was like, "What's firewalking?" And you went, "Walking on fire." I was like, okay, yeah, sure, not doing anything.
48 hours later and we're on hot coals.
Yeah, but it was also like a 2-hour drive and a 2-hour drive back, which is where we had the best chats and talk. And then realising that even though we're coming from these such different perspectives, that we're both so open to learning and understanding and appreciating. So I think that's where it kind of started from, isn't it?
Yeah, it's funny actually, because even I think on the tour journey, I was like, oh my God, I hope we have things to talk about. I was like Googling fun subjects, fun songs. How can I look really cool? Does she like Motown? Does she not? I felt like I was going on a first date. It's like, I'll nip to the organic shop and you're like, there's no difference between organic and non. I was like, oh, okay, she's not impressed by this part.
I changed my jeans because I was like, Paul, do I look cool? I want to look cool.
You did look really cool.
And he was like, change your jeans.
So Paul is currently giggling. This is Sophie's husband who's recording all of this for us. But I've lost where we are now. As we
right, well, actually, should we talk about... So what we thought would be a good topic to cover for our first podcast is breathwork.
Oh, yes.
Which is, I think it has been amazing for me, because when you said, do you want to come to a breathwork class after we'd already done the firewalking, we can talk about that another day. I was like, I'm going to just say yes to whatever you invite me to, Jess, because I'm well up for trying things out. And
Sweat
in
lodge
my
next.
mind, what?
We're going to be doing a sweat lodge next.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have no idea what it is, but I'm in. So I was like, breathwork. I've done yoga and I'm up for kind of nice, kind of meditative breathing. I thought, yeah, that sounds nice. And then you were like, come into my house first for some cacao. And I was like, oh, great. And then it was hectic. And so we didn't really have time to talk. And you just said to me, oh, by the way, prepare yourself. It's going to be really noisy and really weird. And I was like, what? I thought it'd be just like hum, like calm and like relaxing.
Instead, it was like,
yeah. And I was like, what am I going to? And then when we went up and it was all like incense and dark lights and the artwork around, what's that kind of the name of that artwork? Anyway, and they were so lovely, the couple who were running it. And I didn't know what to expect, but I've always been like, I'm like teacher's pet. So like if an instructor tells me to do the thing, I'm like, I can do the thing. Yeah. I will be the best at the thing. I'm going to try and be the best. So shall I tell you what kind of, because Jess and I haven't talked about
everything.
We've kind of kept it for the podcast.
Every time we have a conversation, save for the podcast. Yeah, so we haven't spoken for 3 weeks.
So I thought it'd be interesting. So essentially I did think this might be embarrassing because I'm going to lay here and nothing's going to happen and I'm going to listen to everyone else because the instructor was like, if you want to bark like a dog, if you want to punch your cushion, if you want to moo like a cow. I was like, what is happening here? And I was like, I'm just going to lay here and it's going to be embarrassing. And then I'll have to go, thank you guys, that was good. But that is not what happened.
No. And do you know what as well? Before you go into it, I think the next time you have a breathwork session, I think you'll go deeper and I think you'll have a totally, I genuinely believe you'll have a totally different experience where because you're starting to be more open to this, I think you'll have like a totally wacky, weird and wonderful, I'll tell you, share yours and I'll share some of the experience I've had doing breathwork.
Oh yeah, so I'll share the experience and you tell us more and then I will tell you a little bit about what I uncovered because I immediately was like, what has happened? I need to find out the physiology behind this. And it's a specific sort of breathwork, and there's all different sorts of breathwork. I went into a little rabbit hole when I was doing the research about all the different sorts of breathwork. But essentially, so when we were there, so we were doing holotropic breathwork, and what did you call it?
So conscious connective. So you can, with holotropic, it can be conscious connective, it can be circular breathing. There's lots of different names for it, but primarily it's holotropic.
Yeah.
I feel like I pronounced that wrong.
No, I think,
Sophie said.
Well, I said it like that. Let's just pretend that's definitely how it is. I think it is. So anyway, I did as I was told with the breathing, it's fast breathing, abdominal breathing. And he'd said, you might feel tingling in your fingers, don't worry about that. And, you go with whatever happens to you. It's different for everyone. And as soon as I started breathing, I started feeling the tingling in my fingers really quickly. Yeah. And I was like, wow. And the kind of medic inside of me was like, oh, normally I'd be worried about this. Normally I'd think this was a bad thing. But I was like, right, he mentioned it might happen, just trust in the process.
So that's really interesting. Like your head is going through that process. I thought, wow, okay, yeah.
I was massively overthinking it all at first. And then my first degree was social anthropology, where it's like learning about different tribes all over the world and things like that. And so whilst I was laid there, starting to worry about my fingers tingling, I was like, no, so if you just imagine you're, in a tribe in South America, if doing an ethnographic research, you would just roll with it. So I was like, just roll with it. Just try not to think about it. And then I started to feel good. And he had said at the beginning, some people actually find it almost like ecstatic.
You can have an orgasm.
Orgasmic.
Yes, you
literally can. And then I felt my kind of hips started to move. And I was thinking, oh my God, I'm going to be one of the orgasm people. Wow. Yeah. And I did just start to feel it just felt generally kind of pleasurable.
Yeah.
Not sexual, just.
No, it's kind of.
But I did feel like movement that I wasn't.
So I think you're tapping into there. So when you do breathwork, you can tap into feminine energy or masculine energy. So when you tap into your feminine energy, it's like it's sexual energy, but it's not sexual as in male, female sexual. It's like your life force energy.
Yeah.
From a spiritual woo perspective.
Yeah. And at first I was a bit embarrassed that I was kind of rotating my hips. Yeah. And then I thought, nobody cares. Nobody's looking at me. I couldn't hear everyone because the music's on. So what's really nice, I loved the group setting because it just meant that I knew no one was bothered about what I was doing.
Yeah.
And so then I just felt really good and And then all of a sudden, I burst into tears. And I'm not a crier. I'm just not in life. I'm just not a crier. So my initial instinct was to be embarrassed and stop crying and almost stop my breathing. But then I was like, oh God, no. He said, roll with it. So I carried on the breathing. And then I was properly sobbing, loud sobbing, tears falling backwards down because I laid down. But I still felt good. Yeah. It wasn't sad sobbing. So I was carrying on the breathing thinking, why am I crying? Like, what is happening here? And then all of a sudden I realized that my hips rotating was because I was reimagining giving birth, specifically actually to my youngest, my son. And so, because I remembered that I was doing that when I was delivering. And then the tears were the absolute joy of meeting my baby. And I wasn't feeling the pain of the childbirth. It was just the wonder of childbirth. I could cry about it now. And so then once I realized that was what I was feeling, I could carry on crying and feel so good. And it wasn't like it was a memory. It was like I was
an experience reliving
that. And I don't know where that's come from. You know, I hadn't thought about it he's just turned 7. So it's a long time ago. And I was induced. It wasn't even like that was my best labour. My second one was my best labour. But anyway, I think it was kind of all of them molded together.
No, I was going to say, so from a spiritual aspect, when you said, so when you thought about having Ernie, what kind of birth did you want to have?
Well, with Nelly, my second one, she was a water birth and it went perfectly. And...
Okay, so so from a spiritual perspective, anything that we're holding onto subconsciously will come out through the breath. So if that the experience wasn't as you wanted it to be when you actually physically gave birth, you release whatever needs to be released through the body and through the breath. So you bring in more of the experience that you wanted to have.
Oh, yeah.
Does that make sense?
That does make sense. Yeah, because in my head I was thinking, I wonder why I didn't think about Nellie's, because that was the most...
Because you didn't need to think about Nellie's, because Nellie's, you had the type of birth that you wanted.
Yeah, so I had to be induced with Ernie, so that wasn't ideal. It was still, I was still very lucky. It still went as well as it could.
Yeah.
But that's really interesting. And then soon after that, he kind of came to a close because I think we'd done about 45 minutes of the kind of specific breath work. And then he said, just bring your breath. And as soon as I started breathing normally, I felt physically fine. And then there was the kind of joyous music, and I did feel just completely overjoyed. And I was wowed because I had absolutely not anticipated that at all. So I was immediately like, right, I need to find out what has happened to cause this, because this is incredible.
You see, my experiences with breathwork, I've had, so we've just launched our breathwork certification, but prior to launching that, a lot of, I've had just some crazy ones. Like I've had breathwork experiences where I've literally gone back in time where I've been an alien. like crazy. I went back to another time when I was a witch and I saw my child being burnt at the stake.
Oh my God.
But really kind of, so for me personally, I totally believe in past lives. I really hope Paul got Sophie's face on that gulp. This is why we're bringing it, the woo, the science in you.
Yeah, I'm just nodding. It's okay, fine.
So what I believe to be a past life, and I genuinely do, because I've released a lot of stuff having those experiences to do with fear, to do with like sort of blocks that I felt between myself and my girls. But one really, the breathwork session I did before we did that one was at the same place, and it was quite a shamanic breathwork session. And prior to going, I'd smelt Hattie's hair and I was like, oh God. And what's the word? Like, there was like a resistance where I pulled away from smelling Hattie's hair and I was like, wow, why is that? But ever since so my background, my 3 girls, they lost their biological father. But when they lost their biological father, I felt this like sort of subconscious wall sort of build up, if that makes sense. And I've been working, doing belief coding, doing various different techniques, breath work, somatic work, to try and bring that wall down, if you will. And then when I went into the breathwork session, we set an intention. And my intention was, just to feel this joy, this love and everything in between. And when I went into the breathwork session, doing the breath, you reach higher states of consciousness. And I went back to this past life where I was like this witch with like this energy. Even now I wonder what our listeners are thinking of this story. But I went back to being this witch, and I literally saw my child being burnt at the stake for possessing like inner magic. Now, if we look back to kind of, during the witch trials when these things happened, if you were an energy healer, you would be trialed as a witch. If you were a medium or a psychic, you would literally be trialed as a witch. So it went back to this time, and the child that was being burnt on the stake was actually Hattie.
Oh my gosh, that sounds traumatic though.
Oh, well, it was when I came round. I was like, and Ray, the lady doing the breathwork, she was like, oh, but I think because I've done stuff like this, I know kind of the process in the sense of I know what it had to come up and out. But anyway, so I went back, and then again, I work with what I truly believe to be my spirit guides. So when I'm going through this experience and I'm seeing my child being burnt at the stake, and in that moment, in that past life, I cursed myself to never love again. So the realization that I had during this experience was when the girl's father died, that triggered that wall to never fully love, which created the block. And then as I went through this process, my guides were like, smell your hair. So I smelt my hair, and they're like, your child is always with you. Like, this is her. We're all interconnected. Our cells, our DNA, they're passed down. And then that night I went back, and I literally had gone to bed, and I just led her and I smelt her hair, and it was like a remembrance. So that's my experience with breathwork.
Well, I found it amazing how, because we all shared briefly our experience when we were there, and there were so many different people there for different reasons who had completely different experiences, but all who were super positive about it. And people were saying, I've tried all sorts of therapy for decades, especially people who have struggled with trauma. And they were like, this is completely revolutionized my life. So I have been kind of telling my friends, I'm like, you should try it, you should do it, you should try it.
Well, there's been studies as well, like using holotropic breath. There's been studies where people have had spontaneous healings. And again, because so I did a breathwork session a couple of weeks ago called Star Magic Healing, where it was literally 6 hours doing breathwork. Wow. But the guy that was there, and also from different stuff that I've read, when you work with your breath, you can get into it. Is it a homeostasis? Is it homeostasis where your body is imperfect?
Well, homeostasis is the balancing mechanism. The balance. So the body's always rebalancing everything all the time.
So when you use the breath, and again, you'll I'm interested to see what you've heard, but your body can literally start to repair itself because it goes into that balance.
Oh, repair so damaged from
physical damage, as in emotional health, mental health, physical health.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll tell you what I read up on.
Now.
Yeah. So essentially, because it's a hyperventilation, so because you're breathing more than you would normally, because normally, essentially, on a very basic level, we kind of breathe in oxygen, we breathe out carbon dioxide. Yeah. So when you're breathing very fast, you breathe out more carbon dioxide. So we call it hypocapnia. And this is something normally we would worry about, which is why I had to kind of trust in the process. Yeah. Because what happens when you are hypocapnic is not first of all, but it changes the pH of your blood. So you go into what's called respiratory alkalosis. Yeah. Again, this is something we would certainly worry about in a patient in hospital, but I think it's because it's only transient, so it's only temporary. But it also causes vasoconstriction within the blood vessels of the brain, which essentially means the blood vessels kind of squeeze, so areas of the brain don't get enough oxygen. Yeah. That doesn't sound good, does it? You think if I'd have read this before I went, I might have been like, oh dear. But it's those two things that change the chemicals within the brain that cause this altered state of consciousness. So it is similar to doing LSD, it's similar to doing those kind of...
It releases DMT as well in your system. So
I don't know what DMT is.
I don't know what I know what it again, one thing you'll all realise throughout this podcast, I'm great with stories, but I forget the facts.
Okay, we can look that up afterwards.
So DMT, it's a chemical, we all have it. So it's just a chemical, what the hell is it called? Quick poll, Google DMT. DMT terminology. But essentially when you reach those high states of consciousness, it's the same when, do you know what ayahuasca is?
Yes.
Yeah. So when you have ayahuasca, you release DMT.
But people might not.
So ayahuasca, it's a plant medicine which is from a tree which is in South America and Peru, and generally you use the sap. I think it's the sap of the tree to make a tea. Oh, they got a little jingle. I didn't know it.
We should start a company.
But again, it allows you to reach those high states of consciousness. But it's interesting actually because I didn't realise that. So from my perspective, what you've just said, when we go into hang on, I'm going to recap. So what you've just said, that usually there would be things that you'd be worried about from kind of looking at it from a different perspective. the body is so intelligent. So when we go into hyperventilation, we literally can pass out. So our breath will go back to normal. And it's the same, like when you look at just so for me, if that happens, you know that actually I'll pass out. So I'll go back to the regular state of breathing.
That's what's kind of reassuring. That essentially, if there's anything wrong or you want to stop, you can pretty quickly just go back to normal.
Yeah.
I was just thinking maybe it's hormesis might be the word you were thinking of, because the other thing that happens is, so hormesis is this idea that a little bit of stress on your body can actually be kind of good for you.
No, it's homeostasis. So it's the balance. So when you, because like I said, it changes the chemicals of your breath, but also as well, do you know every time you gasp, so every time you have a shock, you're like that gasp also changes the chemicals within your body, which creates tension in like the fascia. So do you know when, so if people have quite a lot of, if people have had quite a lot of trauma and they have quite a lot of gasps, they tend to be quite knotty because all of that is stored in the fascia. And the fascia is like the funny chickens like layer around all your organs and stuff, isn't it?
Oh, okay. So what I was going to say is that because of the stress that your body's going through, that actually does also release different endorphins and neurotransmitters, that it can also be one of the reasons you feel kind of elated and feel joyous.
Okay. So Skunk, I feel like you need to go a little bit further into that, in the sense of, so when because you're releasing it out, is that what you mean?
Well, because of the changes within the brain, the chemicals. So you actually, and there's this, because of the slight stress, there's changes within the neurotransmitters within the brain, the chemical messengers, and it can release these endorphins, like maybe dopamine, serotonin. Yeah. So that can be what makes you feel good.
Yeah.
And I did feel good, and I think everyone did when we were there.
Yeah.
But I would say, also as the medic, I'd like to point out some safety points, because I wouldn't recommend it, or I'd certainly suggest caution for anyone who's got kind of heart problems, respiratory problems, severe mental health problems. So if you kind of schizophrenia or severe anxiety, that might be difficult, and certainly epilepsy as well, and pregnancy.
But do you know what's interesting actually? So Kim, who we do Breathwork Breakthrough with, the co-founder, she suffers with epilepsy. And when we teach you, we also mention that, these are the contraindications. Like if you suffer with mental health or psychosis or even epilepsy, you would do this at your own risk. But when you actually go into the research and the science, which I can't remember now, so I've just voiced out to Kim, it kind of contradicts the contraindications. But when she gets back to me, I'll play the voice note.
I guess because it would be very difficult to do a proper study. So normally the evidence would be like RCT, so randomized controlled trials, and you'd have a control group. So you would say, right, you people with epilepsy, and we'll do this, and then a group of you won't, and we'll see who has more seizures. But it's never ethical to consider inducing seizures.
Yeah.
So that's why it's difficult to get evidence for it, really.
Yeah.
I guess a lot of the problems are that it is difficult to get the evidence for all of this stuff.
All of this, yes.
Because in fact, we often say alternative medicine, if there was evidence for it, would just be called medicine. Because we do use, it's not like we don't ever use, because often, I'm going off on a tangent now, but often people say things like, I prefer natural things or holistic things. And I'm like, but as a doctor, I am bang up for holistic. And also, we use loads of natural things. Morphine comes from opiate, from poppies.
Yeah.
But there's lots of things that are poison that are natural. So just because something's natural doesn't mean it's actually better. And if there's evidence that this natural thing's going to work, like HRT comes from yams.
Does it?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So natural doesn't necessarily mean safer, and the dose makes the poison.
Yeah, do you know, just following on from that, so I love a bit of a conspiracy. Like friends, I bloody love it. So just kind of to flip that, do you think there could be, so from my perspective, everything that we know, like we know it because we've been taught it. Do you get me? Mm-hmm. So everything to do with like school or everything to do with anything, we only know it because somebody else told us it. Whereas from my own perspective, I'm totally open to thinking, well, anything could sound a bit mental. Totally open to thinking, well, actually, anything could be kind of real or not real. And when we look at kind of like science and things like that, there's a guy I follow called Dr. Bruce Lipton, and he used to be a scientist. But one thing he found was the observer within the experiment can change the outcome because everything is connected to energy. Does that make sense? So if we look at kind of even like scientific studies, so some scientific studies, if we look at eggs, for example, are saying, eggs are the worst things that you could eat. But then other scientific studies would say, eggs are the best things that you could eat. Does that make sense?
Yeah. which is why...
Yeah.
So, which is why we look at the overarching evidence. That's what's really important. Because when I did my diploma in lifestyle medicine, I got super into it and was like, oh, great, studies show this, evidence shows this. And I kind of went down a bit of a trap. And then what I've done since then is kind of gone a bit, I've done a 180 on it. And now I start super skeptical because actually what does the overall picture of evidence show? So for example, with eggs, there might be a study that shows, well, they're very high in cholesterol, so you shouldn't eat them. But there might be another study that shows, well, they're a nutritional powerhouse, you should eat loads of them. And actually, if you look overarching at the evidence, you can get a much better idea that, to be honest, eggs are great. So
we've covered that debate then.
So that's that one done. So I think it's important to do that and not cherry pick. So a lot of people who want essentially confirmation bias. So some people
I think I'm a confirmation bias person.
I have been, and I'm trying not to be. So for example, if someone is a vegan and they look for evidence to prove that plant-based diets are best, that being vegan is the best, whereas realistically there is nuance there. And I'm not saying being vegan is not best or best, but essentially I have learned to be skeptical. And that, I think therefore I also come to that point of view with medicine, with traditional medicine, because a lot of people say, oh, you're just in the pocket of big pharma, et cetera, et cetera. Well, in the NHS, we don't get paid. So in fact, we get audited on de-prescribing. So we have to try and de-prescribe, and that's NHS. So we are definitely not pushing medicines onto people.
So I think
there's this idea of this. And this idea that we're just being fed and we're as if we're all like zombie idiots who just get told things from big pharma and we accept it. We don't. We get taught how to critically analyze studies. So I want to know who paid for the study, what were their, declarations of interest and conflicts of interest, how many people were in the study, And so, so hence what I mean, I've gone 180. So I start skeptical with everything actually, including alternative, but also including conventional medicine. And I want to be, and I think that's what science is, because you have something called the null hypothesis. So in science, essentially you have to try and prove the null hypothesis wrong. The null hypothesis means it does make no difference whatever you're trying to look for. So I think that's a good place for me to be. So I have to always be proved.
I'm definitely confirmation bias. I'm like a gut feeling, intuition, it's right, it's wrong kind of person.
But on the other side of things, if there's not many downsides, if for example, breathwork, there was not going to be a downside to me. I don't have those medical problems that meant it was and actually I got a real joy out of it. And if I'd have just waited for the evidence, it would have never come. So there's no, it's not binary. There's not a right and wrong. Going with your gut is often fantastic.
Whew, thank God. Right, I'm going to see if Kim's got back to me. Hang on. So this will give us the breath work. No, yes, she has. Hang on. So
there's a couple of different studies, but basically what they say is it's hypothesized or whatever the posh word is. I think that's the right word. So for me, for example, it reduces my stress. Does that make sense? And stress is a trigger for my seizures, so it can reduce my stress. However, it's also a contraindication. But with me, I suppose it's the same with everybody for the individual. But there is a study. Give me 2 seconds. There's a study. It's Ewan and Sander, 2010. But because it reduces cortical activity. So the cortisol, obviously you'll probably know this, like the cortisol that's running through your body, like slow breathing technique. So just say, for example, we do circular breathing. I may do it slower and not as such a fast rhythm. But yeah, there's a few different studies, but that's just one that I know of. Hope that helps. And hi, by the way.
She said hi, bye. You do realise you might be on the podcast now.
So I guess the hyperventilation, because there's all sorts of different breath work. So maybe the hyperventilation, be a bit cautious.
Well, no, that's what so that's the type of breath work that she does. That's the one
so the evidence she was saying was for the slow breath work, which...
but with it, I think what she's saying is because it eliminates the stress, it reduces the stress. So again, her seizures will reduce. Thanks, Kim. Got my back there, girl.
We'll come back to you another time.
Yeah, but for anyone, it's funny as well, actually. So with breathwork as well, when you're going into it, so there are studies as well. I feel like I need to get some of these studies. So when we do the podcast, I'll post the links so people can have a look at them. But there are studies that have been done for spontaneous healing, because again, when we hold tension and stress and everything within our joints, and when you release it, literally you can have a physical release. But for me, I love breathwork. I love the trippy side of it. And I always come out feeling like I've released like trauma. Yeah, I love it.
I mean, it was such a surprise to me. I had literally no idea that was going to happen.
There's another one in 3 weeks. Are you up for it?
Well, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to do it again because I had such a positive experience that I'm actually quite nervous that it won't be as good.
It'll be different. It'll be totally different. So I think, this is another thing as well, like for anybody who's thinking of trying breathwork, if it's the first time doing it, the mental chatter is very loud in the sense of you're like, am I doing this right? Is this wrong? Am I breathing right? Nothing's happening. And I had that a lot. And then the more you do it, then you realize if you trust the process and you go into it with no expectations, you have stuff that happens. And then the time when I literally went back to being this alien, I was like, it was a really trippy experience. It was amazing. I was like, oh my God, this is great. So the next time I did breathwork, I thought, oh, brilliant, I'll just go and have this crazy experience. And then I fell asleep. So every breathwork session I've been into, it's all been completely different. But when you go into it with no expectation, your body will give you what you're ready to receive.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, I do. I love it. So you know, I'm glad I said yes when you asked me. And I reckon if people are interested, I would say my friend, I was trying to recommend it and she was struggling to find a breathwork. So what do you think people can kind of Google if they're trying to find somewhere near them?
They can do, yeah. I mean, I'm going to do a shameless plug here. If anyone wants to try, if anyone wants to try our breathwork, Breakthrough Breathwork, we do in-person sessions. We also do online sessions. But when we launch this, I'll make sure there's some details below.
Okay, great.
Okay, do you want to do a shameless plug for anything for you, Soph?
Well, I will in a minute, or we could move on.
Girl. Yeah.
Because we thought it'd be nice to just add on a few extra bits to talk about, to chat about in the podcast. Things we're interested in, which might be kids, beauty, fashion, things that are going on in life. And so I wanted to tell you about a skincare thing. And the reason it's a plug is because I also have a YouTube channel called, I've got 2 YouTube channels.
They're amazing, by the way.
Oh, thank you so much. One, Dr. Sophie GP, which is all the stuff I talk to patients about from a GP point of view, lots of health issues that people might have, get lots of information on. And then I've also got one, which is brand new, Dr. Sophie Lifestyle, where I go through just kind of more health, wellness, beauty stuff. Hacks and tips, and look into kind of debunking, because there's so much information. There's not like a dearth of information out there at the minute when it comes to health and wellness. There's almost too much, and I think it's hard to know what is BS and what is actually valid and worth trying. But anyway, so it's just so I want to talk about snail slime because I've done a video on it. And
I was looking at, is this what this is here?
So this is it.
Oh my God, I was like, what is in this bottle?
Yeah, so this is snail slime that I've been using for a couple of years, I reckon now.
Your skin and Sophie's skin is literally amazing. Like, it is so glowy and dewy. Yeah.
Your skin looks good too. We'll talk about that. So this snail slime, when I first heard about it, because I'm on this, I'm on a group with lots of other medics who are like dermatologists and stuff. And they were like, get this snail slime. And I was like, what? But actually I love it now and it's great. So it's got lots of, it is actually from, and if you look at it, you can see that it's kind of like, it is like slimy.
Is it expensive?
No.
Oh, is it not?
No, the cheapest place I've found it from is Amazon.
Wow.
If people have a look, so you can get it from lots of different places online.
Like
if you kind of do that, you can see it's like,
oh my God. Well, even when I put it out there, like literally, I was like, oh my God, it is like, oh, it's quite nice actually.
Yes, exactly. You think it doesn't smell. It's not sticky or slimy, no.
Oh, it's really weird. It's quite soluble. It's soluble, isn't it? Like, is that the word I'm looking for? Like, it's slimy, but then when I'm touching my hands like that, it doesn't feel slimy.
Sticky at all, yeah.
No.
So it's actually really incredible. So it's got lots of moisturizing properties, and I have dry skin. So it's called a humectant, which essentially means it moisturizes. And that's because it's got something called hyaluronic acid and glycoproteins in it. Yep, which are brilliant. And the more moisturized, kind of dewy, that makes you more youthful. I am clinging on to youth. And it's also good for healing and like acne and scars and stuff.
Because you have really dewy skin. Like, I think when you look at your skin, it does look dewy. And even when you've got no makeup on, you have naturally glowy skin.
Well, not natural. Well,
kind of.
Well, I also use retinol at night as well, which helps, but that makes my skin dry. But yeah, so it's got antimicrobial properties. It's got something called allantoin in it, which helps it's anti-inflammatory. And it helps it's also got glycolic acid. So that helps kind of refresh and renew the skin cells.
So with everything that's in there, is that the actual snail slime that possesses all of that? Oh, no.
So the snails, obviously they're walking up and down all these things. They produce their own antimicrobial properties and things like that. There's apparently two different sorts of the slime. Do you know what? If people want to watch the video, they'll find out all about it.
I feel like I need to ask you one question though. So essentially, I'm just going to go way out here. If I was to find a snail and put it on my face, would it have a similar? I don't think I'm quite there yet. But would it have a similar sort of effect? Do you get me?
I mean, this is literally, it's something like
literally?
96% snail.
Wow.
It is 96% snail secretion.
Wow.
Well, but the only time that the snails secrete it is when they're under stress.
Oh, really?
So you'd have to put the snail on your face and like
And then tap it.
call it mean names.
Listen up, you slimy mofo. You're such a slime ball.
Yeah, you could try that. So anyway, so that's my like little review for today. We're not being paid, but if you want to pay me, Snail CosRx, then I'll take your money. So it'd be quite nice if we review something each week, eh?
Yeah, well, do you know what I'm thinking, right? So I've got a For Your Bear, and a For Your Bear is like this little like a zapper for your skin. It sends is it sonic waves like through your
bear for your bear.
Yeah, that's what it's called. It's amazing. But what I'm now thinking is you've got to use it with like a serum or something quite slimy. So I'm thinking, if your skin's looking this great, I'm going to get some of the slime snail.
Oh, yeah.
Put it on and then use my For Your Bear. The only thing is, like, if it's too high, it does zap you and then your face is like, you feel the nerves.
I'm interested in this, Forio. I've never heard of it.
I'll bring it. I've actually got, I bought two. My friend was like, oh, there's a big one which I've got. She said, oh, I've got the little one for my eyebrows. The little one is, I don't really use it, so you can use it and then see what you think. And then, but honestly, I've honestly noticed a difference in my skin. So I'm the salesman's dream. I've literally gone on. I've bought like their facial scrubber now. I've bought their little UFO facial massager, which like pumps stuff in. Yeah, I've got a consumer dream.
Oh right, well your skin looks good.
Thanks.
Brilliant. All right. Well,
Okay.
should we call it to a close for our first ever?
Hey, do you know what might be interesting? I wonder what.
She's like, no, want to keep talking.
Yeah, no, sorry, I'm not done yet. No, but I'm wondering, is there anything that you guys would want us to review from kind of like, is there anything that, just knowing what you've heard already, write down if there's anything that you want us to review? What do you reckon?
Absolutely. Anything, health, beauty, wellness, we could try it.
And as we're saying this comes to a perfect time because we've currently got 3 out of our 8 children looking at the podcast studio doors trying to get in.
Brilliant.
Not today, kids.
Right, well, I hope you've enjoyed that. So do subscribe and like and review us because I think that helps get the podcast up higher.
And share it on your socials.
Yeah. Let us know what you think. Let us know what topics you want us to cover in the future as well. And we hope you enjoyed it.
Adios.
Bye.